Yes, 2-5. Sports Reports is ordered. In the building, like, review, subscribe, share, rate, do all the free things, do all the good things. And of course, tonight, Mr. Logical and I are going to come at you with a full reaction to week 1 of college football. And then we're going to talk about some bold predictions for the upcoming NFL season. But for now, the focus is on Tallahassee, Florida, where the Florida State Seminoles, early enough in the season, have a must-win game on their hands. Now, if they would have played Clemson played against Georgia as Clemson did this weekend, maybe we wouldn't feel that way because it would be an out-of-conference loss against the number 1 team in the nation. But when we look at it, they lost to the other Georgia school, Georgia Tech, the Yellow Jackets, who were unranked across seas in Ireland. So I do like the fact that Florida State got the long rest, considering that Boston College hasn't played a game yet, right? But Florida State in that game against Georgia Tech, half a yard before contact. That's not going to get it done against another Power 4 team, let alone a conference opponent who's jacked up to beat you as the defending conference champion. Now, last year, Florida State went into Chestnut Hill. And many teams will tell you going into Chestnut Hill is no fun, especially when you got to play BC during the Bandana game. Now, I know BC's record is 4-6 in the Bandana game. You know, they get Michigan State this year, but BC brings the house. They play their hearts out. It's usually the toughest game of the season. So the record is not indicative of the effort that BC plays with in that particular game. But nonetheless, last year, 35-mile-an-hour winds. BC jumped out to a 10-3 lead over the then-ranked 3rd Seminoles. Florida State goes on the run, 24-10, 3 unanswered touchdowns, 4 unanswered touchdowns. Now it's 31-10. So BC from that point locked in. Florida State, punt, fumble. And BC was able to lock Florida State down to the tune of 3rd down, game on the line, about 1:35 left. And BC commits a face mask, which of course was their 18th penalty of the game. School record, by the way. They had 11 in the first half alone. So with all that being said, Florida State escaped with a 2-point win out of Chestnut Hill last year. You know, that Florida State team, a lot better than this team. Better quarterback. Jordan Travis actually played that game. Keon Coleman, well, he didn't play that game. But, you know, you had Johnny Wilson still, Trey Benson, Lawrence Toafili. Toafili is still around. BC held him 7 rushes to 24 yards last year. So both teams had a hard time running the ball. You know, Florida State was at 3.8 yards per carry, BC at 3.7. So that's going to be one of the keys that I'm looking for tonight. Who can run the football? Because Florida State, coming off of last week's putrid performance against Georgia Tech, has a bell to answer. You know, they were picked by a lot of people, including myself, as the ACC favorite this year. The last thing you want to do is go 0-2 to start the conference season, especially when your next 3 games are also conference opponents, including a trip at SMU. So, Thomas Castellanos, that was the game where he announced himself last year, right? You know, he went 20 of 33 for 305 with a touchdown and a pick. He led all rushers with 95 yards. Now, that's my question about this game. Is Bill O'Brien going to let Castellanos be Castellanos? Now, remember Castellanos. He was recruited by UCF to be a running back, but he wanted to play quarterback. So he ends up at BC. Last year was the first-time starter. Took him to a bowl game, won a lot of close games. So as a Florida State fan, when you look at this game, there's 2 things that are detrimental disadvantages for the FSU defense. a running quarterback, and rain. Florida State does not play well in rain as long as I can remember. This goes back to the early 2000s. Thursday night football, losing a game to unranked Louisville, who was in the Big East at the time. This goes through last week. Just a little bit of light rain in Ireland screwed Florida State up. We're expecting 74 degrees, so I don't know how much the humidity will be a factor tonight. But what will be a factor, as I mentioned earlier, is Bill O'Brien, new head coach at BC, going to allow Thomas Castellanos to improvise when he wants to? Is he going to allow him to take off and run instead of looking for that next progression as he tends to? He's a dangerous runner. Like I said, he was recruited to play running back. So this game is just up in the air for me. Now, I think Florida State should, operative word, should win this game along the lines of, say, 34-13 is the way that it plays out in my mind if both teams play the way that I expect them to. But obviously that doesn't always happen. So I don't know what BC can do to Florida State defensively that will take Florida State out of the game outside of the fact that Florida State has a bum running their offense. And I don't even mean bum disrespectfully. I mean bum factually. DJU, last week in the first half, we talked about it. Went 12 of 14, 96 yards. Sounds great, right? Efficient. Got some yards, but the problem is that was a lot of yard after the catch. His actual air yards were negative 0.1 to be exact. So was that more of Mike Norvell not trusting DJ? Or was that more of DJ not taking chances? We had this conversation, myself and Mr. Logical, about Desmond Ridder last year. We see these quarterbacks that manage the game. DJ wasn't even used in the running game the way that I expected him to be. This is a guy that completed 57% of his passes at Oregon State last year. So his legs are going to come in heavy to Florida State's season and what they're going to do this season. So, with all of that being said, wrapping it all up in a bow, Jeff Hafley was supposed to be the defensive coach at Boston College, but the last couple of years they finished in the 80s or lower to include number 100. So, what does BC's defensive talent look like? They had a great corner last year that got injured and missed the rest of the season. He's not there. So, as I take this through and just map it out in my mind, I see Florida State's defense getting up off the mat, making Castellanos make bad decisions. So give me Florida State 27-17.